Hi, I'm Catherine with Craft and Doodle, and I'm going to show you how to make this really cute little key ring with beads out of t-shirt yarn. What you're going to need is, first of all, t-shirt yarn. You're going to need 3 pieces that are about a little over 2 feet each. And if you're not familiar with t-shirt yarn, you probably just don't know that you're familiar with t-shirt yarn. If you look at this, what it is it's about a 1 to 1.5 inch strip of t-shirt. And then you stretch it and it rolls up. And it gives us this nice, soft, stretchy material that's pretty uniform to work with. You'll also need some beads of your choice with large holes, because you're going to need to get the yarn through the holes. It doesn't have to be normal beads. You'll need some scissors, some masking tape, a split ring or key ring, and a clasp or another split ring. So to start with, whenever you put this yarn on the split ring, you're not going to be able to add any keys or really anything that's closed, because you'll need to be able to slide the key into this opening and all the way around the key ring. And what happens, and I learned the hard way on this one, you can see there's nothing attached, is even if you attach the yarn to the side opposite the opening on the split ring, whenever you slide the yarn around, it's going to get caught on the opening and it's not going to move any further. You can see, I mean, I'm applying quite a bit of pressure there, and short of tearing it up, that yarn isn't moving from that position. So we'll want to make sure that whether you want to use like maybe two split rings, like if you want to, you could do that so that here you can put your keys or whatever on this. Or you can use a clasp like I'm using here, and it just makes it a little bit easier to clip on and off, and honestly I think it looks better. So if you are using something that's closed like this clasp, you need to go ahead and put it on the split ring before we start attaching yarn. Okay, now you can set one piece of this t-shirt yarn aside. We're going to start with 2 pieces. You're going to fold it in half. So you have this loop right here. And we're going to go up, stick the loop up through the key ring from the bottom, stick your fingers through, grab these 2 loose strands or the loose ends and pull them through. So now you have this loop that's going to keep it on the key ring. And you've probably done this many times, so probably don't need to go over that with you. And then we're going to do the same thing with the other piece of yarn. Okay, I just like to snug it up pretty well. You don't want it to look sloppy, and push it together. Now, you'll see we have 2 different sides to this, of course. We have the side where the strands come out of the loop, and we have the side where the loop is going over. And I find that it's easier to work with if the loops are up, facing up toward me. And the reason for that is, if you look at this, to me intuitively, this looks like the front, where you have this pretty, almost like the top of a braid, like if you were braiding hair. And that's these loops right here. And on the other side, especially whenever you first start, it doesn't feel right to me. So visually it makes more sense if I start, for me, it makes visually more sense if I start with these loops up. Now, I generally, whenever I'm just doing these, I just have it up here, I'm working with it, I don't have it secured down. But my understanding is most people find it a lot easier to do if you have it secured. And then also, this will make it a lot easier to video and for you to be able to see what I'm doing. Okay. Now, what you're looking at between my fingers right now is just a series of square knots. It's probably what you've seen on every paracord bracelet ever. We're just not working with paracord. We're working with soft, stretchy, pretty t-shirt yarn because pretty matters. Okay, so we're going to separate this. What we're really working with here is 3 pieces. The middle 2 stay together, so it's kind of like one piece. It gives the piece a girth, if you will. And you have the 2 outermost pieces, which are going to make up the design that you see on the outside. So, like I said, this is a series of square knots. So to create a square knot, you take one of the outermost ones, in this case I'm using the right, create a loop and lay it over the middle strands. Then we're going to take the left, we're going to bring it over the strand we just placed sideways, so it's over it. Pinch this where it crosses and take this left strand and you're going to stick it under where it crosses and up through this loop. And you should have one coming down either side, and we're just going to snug that up gently. I personally think that the first one is the most difficult because you don't have a pattern going yet, but just snug it up. Don't overdo it, or you'll get something, well, it's just not as pleasing and it's going to be a lot smaller than you expect. Okay, and now we're going to go to the other side. So in the first knot, we started with the right hand side and made a loop. So in the second one, we're going to start with the left hand side and make a loop and lay it across the middle strands. We're going to bring this right hand strand over the strand you just laid sideways, pinch this little cross, push this strand under and up through the loop. And snug it up. And you really can get t-shirt yarn too tight, so just give it a gentle snug. That's all you got to do. Okay, and then we just alternate back and forth. I tend to forget which side I just did. Honestly, I've kind of already forgotten which side I did. So how I tell is when you're looking at this, you can see these, they look like stitches almost going down the sides, and they're alternating. So they're not at the same place. It's one and then another one, and then it alternates down the sides. So you can look at this and you can see, for example, here we have 2 stitches, one on each side. And you can see that the one on the left stops about halfway into the one on the right, down the bracelet. And it becomes more apparent as you get further. So this is the one that needs to create the stitch next. I'm calling this a stitch, this kind of vertical at the, or lengthways. So what creates that stitch is going over this right here, is going over this sideways strand. And so that's how you can remember which side you need to do next you just know, you just look to see which one needs a stitch, and I kind of messed that up. I don't know how, but I did mess it up. Okay, so yeah, here, let's do this. Here we go. You just look to see which one needs done next. So in this case, the right-hand side needs to make the next stitch. So the left-hand thread is the one you loop first. Now, you can make this as long or as short as you want. But what's important is about 2 to 3 full knots, so left and right, before you get to the length you want this braid or square knotted piece to be. You need to stop. So let's see how many I did here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And here I just have 3. So I'm going to do one more full knot, maybe 1.5 actually, because I just have 2 on this side. And then I'll show you the next step. And I just squished these up by pulling on the middle and pushing those knots up. And I think it just gives it a nice plump look in here, and I like that. So what we need to do now that we're about 3 full knots away from our desired length, we're going to use this this third piece of yarn. So you don't have to do this here. You can do it later, but I like this because this is what's gonna feed into our gathering knot, and it's gonna keep us from having ends that show. I really don't like untidy ends that show or that I have to worry about coming out. So just lay this other piece up here with plenty sticking out. It doesn't matter how much, as long as you have plenty to get a hold of and it's not going to get pulled down. And then we're going to continue our knots. I'm going to stop here because I want to have enough of this yarn left in order to give me some fringe after I do this gathering knot. Now I'm going to scooch that up a little bit just to make it plump, because again, I like for those to look nice and, you know, plump. And then I'm going to remove this from the masking tape because I cannot do this loop at the angle. The next loop I need to do at the angle that is going to show. Okay, so you are going to have, at this point, you're going to have your knotted piece, this little thing sticking out. You're going to have 2 really pretty short pieces here that are the sides. You're going to have 2 longer pieces, that was the middle. And then you're going to have 1 really long piece. Now, if you don't have a really long piece to work with here, that's okay. But you're going to need to distinguish it from the originals in some way, because this really long piece is the other end of this that we added in. And it's important that you know which of these threads or strands is the other end of this piece sticking out. So in another one I did where I didn't have a long piece, I just tied a knot in the end of it. That way I could distinguish. Now, this is where we're going to do our gathering knot. And this is how we're going to finish this off. So going to lay the really long one, the one we added in, aside, and we're going to bring down these 4, the 2 side in the middle, and we're just going to get them how we want them. So I think that looks pretty good. Now we're going to take this extra one we added in. We're going to go down about 1.5 inches maybe and make a loop and come back up. So you can see we have a loop right here. I'm holding the original yarn in my left hand. The loop I made with the added on piece is right here. Now, I find it easiest just to hold this down with my left thumb, or I guess maybe in your case, right, you know, whichever your dominant hand is, thumb and first finger. And then we're going to wrap this around the entire braid. And then where it would normally feel natural to wrap to the right so that you're moving away, we're actually going to wrap back and around this loop. And we want to make 4 or 5 really good loops around, and they don't have to be really tight, and they don't, but I also don't want them really loose at this point. So now you can see I have my 4 loops around. So on the next time around, what I'm going to do is I have this little loop that I created still sticking out. I'm going to push the end of my gathering knot yarn through there. And I'm not going to tug on it yet. I'm going to just pull it to where it's in there. I'm going to hold all this down. And you remember, this is the other end of this long piece we just wrapped around. So we're going to hold on to this somehow. Okay, this will probably work. And then we're going to tug on this other piece. And you can see it pulling that up. Now, if we stopped here, we'd have first, whenever we cut this, although I guess we can make a tassel out of it, but when we cut this, we're going to have a blunt in there. And also I'm going to be worried about it coming undone. And even if we wanted to make a tassel out of this, I just feel like that looks sloppy, just sticking out here. So I don't want that to stick out. I'm going to continue to pull this thread until you see it pulls that loop back up inside of itself. And now this is where we're going to tighten the whole thing up. So you're going to grab that really long strand, and we're going to pull on both ends pretty firmly. And if it gets kind of got wanky here or wonky, you just, just kind of straighten it up. This is really like a fiddle, pull kind of thing. So I think that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to give it another tug just to make sure it's nice and secure. Now, this long piece, I said, I acted like I was going to cut this off. I'm not going to cut this off. I'm not even sure why I said that. Obviously, my brain's just done. But I am going to snip this piece. And the reason that I started up here is so it'll hide it. Because once I snip this, and you want to snip really close, but be careful not to snip your other yarn. See, right here you can see the end of that. But once I just wiggle, it's gone. It is hidden, and as far as we know, magic is what's holding this together. Okay, next we are done except for making this pretty and beaded. So we're just going to cut all of these a good length. I chose this length because that was the shortest one. And then we're going to pick out some pretty beads. You may have a bead with a really big hole and you can just push this through. I don't. I mean, it's fairly large, but it would take a really big hole for this to just push through. So what we do is go ahead and unroll this end of the first tassel that you want to put the bead on. And we're going to roll it from the corner. So roll, 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 and you'll see I'm getting kind of this point here. And then that point is going to allow us, it's going to allow us to stick that point through the bead and pull the bead on. And so we just want to go ahead and do that with all of our beads on each strand. Okay, now that you have all your beads on, you just decide how long you want those tassels to be. A tie, and tie it. Okay, the last thing to do is trim your tassels, and I know this is silly, but on bows, whenever people make pretty bows on a ribbon, they always cut it at an angle, and it makes it look fancy, like you know what you're doing. So I like to cut these at an angle and make it look fancy, like I know what I'm doing. And there you have it, your pretty beaded t-shirt yarn keychain. Like I said, you can make it as big or as short, long as short as you want.